Welcome back to askreddit Discover channel. What is the best unexplained mystery? The disappearance of Terence Williams and Felipe Santos. Two men, unrelated, who didn't know each other, disappeared from Naples, Florida 3 months apart under the exact same circumstances. Both men were last spotted being arrested by Deputy Steve Calkins for driving without a license. Neither men were taken to the jail. They just disappeared. His story is that he dropped both men off at Circle K convenience stores and drove away. There isn't as much evidence to go on with Santos' disappearance, but his story was actively disputed by the available evidence when it comes to Terence's disappearance. For instance, he had Terence's car towed and told the tow operator that the car was abandoned. But there were witnesses who saw him pull over Terence and arrest him. What did he do with these men? My own theory is that he gave them a starlight ride, in other words, he drove them into the wilderness and dropped them off for them to walk home and they died of exposure/dehydration. To me it makes the most sense with the evidence. But maybe he's a serial killer, who knows? A podcaster just used my Reddit posts about the case as the basis for his recent episode. I was pretty psyched. This is my hometown and literally no one talks about it. Almost everyone knows about it, we just don't talk about it. Everyone knows he definitely killed them though. Most people I've asked about it think he killed them and dumped their bodies in the wilderness, possibly fed them to the gators. He didn't just have the car towed. Terence had pulled the car into a cemetery parking lot. The cop then took the car and parked it on the street so he could file an abandonment and have it towed. There was a shit ton of inconsistencies. Just a tip, swapping between their last names and first names is confusing, especially when this is likely the first we've heard of them. This is fecking me up. Unsolved cases like this terrify me. First thought, a killer cop in Naples? No way. Then I saw it was Naples, Florida and it became somewhat more believable. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Long story short, he was driving down a road in Minnesota in 2008 and came off into a ditch. He phoned his father to ask him to pick him up and told him where he was, and his father said he would pick him up at a nearby town called Lind and that Brandon should walk there and meet him. As his parents were on the way to pick him up, they were on the phone to him. They were unable to see him initially, so they asked him to flash his car's lights. Nothing. He said he could see the lights of a nearby town and would walk towards them. His father dropped his mother back at home and went back out to find him. At around 2 a.m., after around 47 minutes on the phone, Brandon yelled "Oh sit," and the phone hung up. That was the last anyone ever heard from him. His car was found near Taunton, Minnesota, around 20 miles from where he said he was. His phone was never recovered. No trace of him has ever been found. No one knows what the lights he saw were, why he yelled "Oh sit," why he was 20 miles from where he said he was, where he went or where he is. This is one of the few on the thread I haven't heard before, and it's pretty interesting. Is this widely known or are you from the area? Why don't articles like the one you linked provide photos? In case someone has seen the missing person. I don't know, but here. This is one of the few here that actually gave me chills. He must have fallen into the devil's kettle. To me, it's Jack the Ripper, but a lesser known one was the boy in the box. In February of 1957, a boy around 4 to 6 years old was found beaten and nude in a box outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His picture was spread all around Pennsylvania, and no one has any idea who he is. They even did a fictionalized version of the story on Cold Case. Similar thing happened in my hometown in the 1930s or so. Some kid that was only around 7 or 8 years old went swimming with his friends in a secluded swimming hole and disappeared. For a while it was thought that he drowned and was swept downriver, but he turned up a few weeks later with his throat slashed next to the railroad tracks. Happened almost 90 years ago and it's still unsolved. Edit, his name was Buddy Schumacher. That webpage though, geez. That's actually right in my neighborhood, and I just heard about it this past month. It's so bizarre. I can't believe no one knows anything about it. There was an SVU episode about this. It gave me nightmares. Is that the one where Olivia lets her personal feelings completely compromise the case? Oh, wait. Tara Calico, who disappeared in Sept 1988. A photograph of 2 children emerged in June 1989. It is speculated that the female is Tara. The photograph was discovered in a parking lot by a woman, who claimed there was a Toyota van parked in the spot with a mustached 30-plus-year-old in the vehicle when she went inside the store. The other person in the photograph, a missing male, is speculated as being another missing child, Michael Henley, from New Mexico. Scotland Yard confirmed the female was Tara Calico, but tests of the photo conducted by the FBI came up with inconclusive results. Henley was discovered dead near where he disappeared, in the wilderness. So it wasn't him. There was a 4chan thread a while back where someone posted another image of Tara Calico that no one had ever seen before. Edit, think this was the one. Why is Scotland Yard involved in this case? I don't know. I was wondering the same thing. The agencies probably help one another with cases occasionally. Other than the fact it looks nothing like her. Look at the shape of the nose. Everything looks different. Looks posed and like she took the picture herself with the out-of-frame hand, after draping loose rope around herself and duct taping a sock the other hand. I'm pretty sure they concluded that Tara was confirmed being killed by a driver who then hid her body. I can't remember all the details, but it took a few years to find the remains. Also, the boy they thought was also in the picture was confirmed found, remains, tangled in a barbed wire fence in the wilderness. Basically they confirmed he got lost. The Voynich manuscript. A long, detailed, and elaborate field guide describing plants and animals that don't exist in a language or code nobody can crack. Other than an insanely elaborate hoax, I have no explanation. I saw a portion of a TV show on hoaxes a while back where they did a bit on the Voynich manuscript. Basically, they figure it's a hoax because there aren't enough short words, and worked out a way by which skilled calligraphers could quickly write pages of Voynichese using a large grid filled with Voynichese letters and some blank squares, and a variety of templates with squares cut out. The calligraphers would slap the templates down onto the grid and draw the letters. I believe they also mentioned that the book also dates back to a time when manuscript hoaxes were extremely popular, and people would pay a lot of money for a one-of-a-kind book. I wish I could remember the title of the show, or even what channel it was on. It's a dude's art project, wasn't it? Pretty good work. How do they know what it's describing if no one can understand the language it's written in? Illustrations are usually pretty language independent. Has anyone ever taken the script and flipped like a mirror? Or turned it upside down? My thinking is that it's so simple that nobody's thought of it. You can try. Download a.pdf. Oh yeah, it's been a mystery for 500 years and nobody has thought of that. You genius, you solved it. To be fair, people thought Da Vinci's notebooks were in code for a few centuries until someone glanced at one in a mirror. The Oakville Blobs. Basically, it started raining one day and citizens noted that the rain wasn't water, it was strange jelly blobs. It happened 6 times in the next 3 weeks, and mass sickness followed. I can tell you that Oakville is fecked up enough that military experiments would probably improve the place. It actually seems to have just been one farm, with one already sick person. Seems like there was a couple samples taken, but it doesn't appear they were actually tested very thoroughly. If you follow the link to the star jelly page, there are a couple of possibilities that are probably much more likely, such as gelatinous algae growths that could appear after rains and slime molds. Edit, also 2 times, not 6. Sounds like take shelter. Like in Terraria? What the feck? Like in Terraria, except instead of fighting you the slime just gives you pneumonia. The Stardust Crash and the meaning of Stendek. A plane flying over the Andes delivered a final coded message, Stendek, minutes before disappearing. The plane was discovered by hikers 50 years later, but the meaning of Stendek still remains a mystery. A theory suggests that the pilot may have been suffering from hypoxia and misspelled descent, but the message was sent 3 times with the same spelling. This website posits a number of plausible explanations, such as that the Morse for Stendek is only 1 character off from instead spelling VALP, the call sign of the Valparaiso airport north of Santiago. If the wireless operator in Santiago misinterpreted the message to add that 1 dot, plausible. If he already had Stend and assumed the last letter was AC, then it doesn't strain too much credulity to posit that the doomed pilots had realized they were off course and tried to reach out to the airport that they thought was nearest. Maybe it is actually just gibberish. I have seen some hilariously garbled attempts at typing things in patient notes, and you'll speak to the clinician, and they'll have no idea, or you'll be able to work it on from context, and find yourself wondering how PUPD turned into GOOF. I did a research project on the crash and it's surprisingly easily explained actually. During the time of the crash, navigation was incredibly basic, by which I mean mainly based on timings and compass headings when physical landmarks aren't available. The weather was bad on the day of the crash, and the area was treacherous for aircraft to fly in cloud cover because mountains have a nasty habit of revealing themselves too late, so they crew flew at a higher altitude than usual to keep visibility. Jet streams, very strong winds at high altitudes, were virtually unknown at this point due to technology limitations, so as the plane was on course, they were unaware that they were flying into strong headwinds, leading the crew to believe they were making good time and on course when actually they were miles further from the airport than they thought. They then began their descent, straight down into the mountain range, unaware due to the cloud cover. The plane actually crashed on a glacier, the impact of which triggered an avalanche, sealing the wreckage inside the glacier, only to be discovered decades later when it reached the bottom of the glacier and the ice melted around it. Now, Stendeck could be interpreted a number of ways, however the prevailing theory is that is was intended to say Stardeck, an easy confusion considering N would be dash and AR would be dot, with Stardeck meaning, standard arrival time, beginning descent. The message also plays further into the theory that the pilots/navigators believed that they were closer to their destination than they actually were due to the headwind. It's an anagram for scented, a warning that somebody probably farted and they needed some candles. The most depressing is JonBenet Ramsey. The deeper you get into it, the more confusing it gets. The most popular theory at the minute is that she was sexually assaulted and killed by her 9-year-old brother, far from fact, by the way, which just goes to show how crazy this mystery is. I'm in the Ramseys did it camp. There's too much evidence contradicting the idea of an intruder. I hope this case will be solved within my lifetime, but the only way it will happen is if John or Burke come forward with some new revelation, but I don't think either of them would incriminate the other or reveal themselves as the killer, and it would do them no good to reveal that Patsy did it. The whole case is so sad and fecked up, that poor little girl. Feck. On r/MakeAndGaMurderer I read about Cold Case Cameron and his theory that a serial killer named Edward Wayne Edwards is responsible for pretty much every unsolved mystery America has. While his theories wander off into the moors at times, his claims that Edwards murdered Ramsey do make some kind of sense. I think her mother accidentally killed her. Maybe she was upset because JonBenet had accidentally wet the bed again, who knows. Likeliest theory is that she banged JonBenet's head against something really hard, example the bathtub, unintentionally delivering a fatal blow. Once the Ramseys realized what had happened, they covered it up. When her body was discovered in the basement while police were there, the Ramseys feigned shock and disbelief and sadness, but they knew the body would be there. The father was the one that found the body after police were unable to. When her body was brought upstairs, the Ramseys then left the house. When parents discover that their child has just been murdered, they do not leave the body, they will cling to the body for as long as they can. However, the Ramseys had probably already grieved the shock of her death prior to the arrival of the police. There are so many details in this case that just do not add up. The letter left behind by the kidnappers is the biggest one that bothers me. I do not think the Ramseys intentionally killed her, it was probably an accident, but they covered it up. Unfortunately, I honestly don't think we will ever know the true story. That case will haunt me till I die. So many stories and leads and whodunits. Harold Holt, the Prime Minister of Australia, just disappeared while swimming at the beach in 1967. Dude had heart problems. The beach was rough that day. He just had a heart attack and the water swallowed him. Australian beaches may be some of the most beautiful around, but they can be incredibly treacherous. They're so bad in fact that we make entire TV series about tourists who nearly drown at one of our safer ones. Bondi Rescue. We honored his memory with a swimming pool, though. That's a pretty treacherous beach too. I'd hardly call it that, fairly large waves crashing against a rocky cliff. What makes it better is that it was a military base too. I find it more amusing that we named a swimming pool after him. In 2001, they found a woman's body in a little wooded area in the parking of El Hospital Royal Victoria in Montreal. They called her Madame Victoria and have never found anything about who she was. They did facial reconstruction, A popular TV show made a sort of documentary about everything they knew to try and find her, but still nothing. How does someone go die in a parking in the middle of a city and not a single person knows who she is? I think it's awesome. Maybe awesome isn't the right word. What if there is a super secret slavery organization going on and she was born and raised a slave, but escaped? When she escaped, she died of exposure or something, and that is why they found her in such an odd place. The Royal Vic always creeped me out. When I used to volunteer there are some parts of the building where you feel like you're in a 1990s horror film set in the 1950s. The smell is odd too. I spent several months there being treated for a severe autoimmune disease, and I found it easier to think about my possible death than the creepiness of the hallways. There's something weird about that castle on the mountain.